A Vatican report has found that 2 popes ignored allegations of serial sex abuse by a now disgraced former US Cardinal, Theodore McCarrick. The report found that Popes Benedict and John Paul II chose to believe the Cardinal's denials. Russia has been deploying troops in Nagorno-Karabakh after Armenia and Azerbaijan signed a deal to end the military conflict in the disputed region. Fighting there has left several thousand people dead since September. The US Supreme Court has begun hearing a case which could overturn the healthcare legislation known as Obamacare. The court has become more conservative since it ruled in 2012 to leave the law intact. The chairman of the English Football Association, Greg Clark, has resigned after using a racially offensive term while giving evidence in Parliament. He's apologised for using unacceptable words, saying they were a disservice to the game.
The Supreme Court is hearing arguments today over the legality of the Affordable Care Act. At issue is whether the elimination of the penalty for failing to maintain health insurance, also known as the individual mandate, makes the entire Health Care Act unconstitutional. Ending Obamacare was a centerpiece of President Trump's re-election campaign. President-elect Joe Biden has promised to expand the law and restore the individual mandate. A decision by the High Court, which could put at least 20 million Americans' health care coverage at risk, is expected by June of next year. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is blocking resources earmarked for the transition between the Trump and Biden administrations as a series of legal challenges to the presidential election process continues. Advisors to President-elect Biden are calling on the General Services Administration to acknowledge him as the winner of the election. That would give them access to view detailed classified information, embed representatives with government agencies, and begin the process of vetting potential cabinet members. Currently, Biden leads Trump by nearly 5 million votes nationally, according to the Associated Press. And on the heels of news that a COVID-19 vaccine being developed by Pfizer and German partner BioNTech is on track to be authorized as early as next month, Western governments are facing the logistical challenge of how to inoculate a majority of the population in a matter of months. Pfizer said it hopes to deliver up to 100 million doses of the vaccine this year and another 1.3 billion in 2021. But potential roadblocks include ensuring adequate supply, running large-scale vaccination centers where the shots can be safely and quickly administered, and building new databases to track who's getting them.
As scientists around the world race to develop COVID-19 vaccines, U.S. pharmaceutical giant Pfizer says initial test results of its vaccine suggest it's more than 90% effective. The company's chairman says it's a great day for science and humanity.
When you realize that your vaccine has a 90% effectiveness, that's overwhelming. You understand that the hopes of billions of people and millions and businesses and hundreds of governments that were felt on our shoulders, now we can credibly tell them, I think we can see light at the end of the tunnel.
The messenger RNA-based vaccine is considered a revolutionary new approach intended to boost the production of antibodies. The trial is still ongoing, and Pfizer says data could change. But it plans to apply for emergency use authorization as soon as possible. Pfizer expects to produce up to 50 million vaccine doses globally this year and up to 1.3 billion doses next year. The company has agreed to supply Japan with doses of the vaccine for 60 million people by the end of next June. Experts welcomed the first successful interim data from a large-scale clinical test, but they say they need to know more details, especially about the vaccine's safety.
Right now we're told 90% efficacy, but we're not quite sure what that means. Does that mean preventing any illness or just serious illness? What about the transmission? Does the vaccine prevent transmission? So we need a lot more information, but indeed this is very promising, no question.
Meanwhile, Brazil says it's temporarily halting clinical trials for a vaccine being developed by the Chinese pharmaceutical firm Sinovac. Officials say a participant exhibited unexplained symptoms last month, and they're looking into the cause. The trial involves more than 10,000 volunteers in Brazil. The government had recently announced that it would import 6 million doses by the end of the year. More than 50 million coronavirus cases have been reported globally, with over 1.2 million deaths, according to a survey by Johns Hopkins University in the U.S. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has hailed Pfizer's announcement, calling it great news. But he's urging Americans to wear masks as it'll take months before vaccinations become available. 2 days after his victory speech, Biden convened a task force to tackle the public health crisis that's resulted in over 10 million Americans contracting the virus.
We could save tens of thousands of lives if everyone would just wear a mask for the next few months.
And the incoming president had a telephone conversation with Canada's leader to pledge more cooperation in fighting the disease. But the Trump administration is poised to continue a legal fight over what Trump calls election fraud.
This election is not over, far from it. We have only begun the process of obtaining an accurate, honest vote count.
Journalists urged Trump's team to come up with evidence.
Do you know that fraudulent votes were actually cast, or are you simply saying we don't know because we couldn't see?
Look, what we are asking for here is patience. We're aware of all the reports of thousands of votes in Nevada that were cast by those who are not eligible. We're hearing these reports. We're seeing them come in. We are vetting them.
But so far, they've failed to provide clear answers. The incumbent president has not appeared in public for days. He took to Twitter to criticize the timing of the Pfizer announcement. He said the FDA and the Democrats didn't want him to have a vaccine win prior to the election, so instead, the news came out 5 days later. The coronavirus continues to spread in Japan, with several prefectures reporting more than 100 cases on Tuesday. The daily tally in Tokyo topped 100 for 8 days in a row. The number of cases tends to be low on Monday and Tuesday because fewer virus tests are conducted over weekends. Osaka reported 226 cases, the second highest ever for the Western Prefecture. More than 14,000 people have now been infected there. The governor of Hokkaido in the north is worried about a recent surge in cases. Suzuki Naomichi told Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide that he'll deal with clustered infections more quickly, increase hospital beds, and secure more hotel rooms to isolate people with mild symptoms. The governor asked for assistance from the central government, warning there could be a shortage of health officials if infections spread throughout Hokkaido.
The Prime Minister told me the government will work together to deal with the situation. We will do whatever we can to contain the spread of the virus by the end of November.
The Prime Minister referred to the government's domestic travel promotion campaign known as Go To Travel.
We're monitoring the situation and we will carry out the campaign, taking into account experts' views. Currently, we do not plan to exclude Hokkaido from the program.
Suga attended a government task force meeting later in the day.
The number of new infections has exceeded 1,000 several times in recent days. We need to be on the highest alert.
Suga told officials to do all they can to prevent the spread ahead of the winter while maintaining social and economic activities. Across Japan, more than 110,000 people have been infected. Over 1,800 have died. Prime Minister Suga has instructed his cabinet to compile a third supplementary budget draft for fiscal 2020. Suga told a cabinet meeting on Tuesday that the budget should cover additional economic measures based on three major pillars. The first is to prevent a further spread of coronavirus infections. The second is to achieve a virtuous cycle by shifting the economic structure towards digital reforms and a greener society. And the third is to make Japan stronger against disasters. Japan's finance minister was more specific about details.
Looking at the current situation, demand is picking up, not only for automobiles, but in many other industries as well. I think the government needs to take this into account and ensure a recovery is led by private demand.
Meanwhile, Aso did not mention the expected scale of the budget. The Japanese government has decided to extend the Maritime Self-Defense Force's counter-piracy mission off Somalia by another year. It had been set to end on November 19th, but officials point to a continued threat. Since 2009, Japanese destroyers and patrol aircraft have been guarding commercial ships in the area based on the anti-piracy law. The decision to extend the mission was made at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday.
Anti-piracy measures undertaken by troops from various countries, including the self-defense forces, are an extremely significant deterrent. We need to continue this kind of arrangement.
The government will increase the number of personnel to cope with any problems on aircraft and also as a precautionary measure against the coronavirus. Japan held its first international sporting event since the outbreak of the coronavirus on Sunday. It was a welcome return to action for the athletes and a valuable chance for the organizers of the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics to put their anti-virus measures to the test. Artistic gymnasts from Japan, the United States, Russia, and China took part in the Friendship and Solidarity competition in Tokyo. They were required to take PCR tests every day and not go anywhere except their hotel and the venue of the event. On Tuesday, officials from the International Gymnastics Federation and the Tokyo Olympic Organizing Committee met in Tokyo.
It's important to theoretically ensure safety, but also establish an environment where athletes can feel safe and secure.
The officials agreed that detailed communication with athletes is needed to better convey the rules and restrictions. They also discussed the importance of transportation and accommodation. An Olympic official said the gymnastic event is a good example of how to hold the competition during the pandemic. Japanese weather officials will drastically reduce observations of natural phenomena such as the season's first bird call and the blooming of flowers. Nearly 90% of the observations, which began about 70 years ago, will be terminated at the end of this year. The Meteorological Agency began observing the blooming of flowers and the first chirping of birds in 1953 to report changes in the season. But the agency says it'll stop observations of 51 kinds of plants and animals. The list includes Japanese bush warblers, large brown cicadas, and black-spotted pond frogs. Officials say it's become increasingly difficult to find such plants and animals near weather stations due to urbanization. But the agency says it will continue to observe cherry blossoms, Japanese plum trees, and ginkgo trees, among others. It says such plants are still suited for signaling changes in the season. Weather officials say they hope people will keep using their reports as a reference.